The screen fades in from black. A gentle hum of anticipation settles as the next segment begins. There is a subtle shift, not just in the lighting, but in the mood. This is no longer a show for entertainment. It's become a stage for reckoning. The audience, still seated under warm studio lights, seems unsure whether to applaud or remain frozen. Steve clears his throat softly. For once, the king of daytime charisma isn't sure how to move forward. He gently sets his cue cards aside, fingers trembling just slightly. There is something sacred in the air now, as if a room full of strangers knows they've just witnessed something real, something not meant for applause. Traoré's words still hang there, not loud but lingering. Steve leans back in his chair, eyes never leaving Ibrahim. His brows are furrowed, not in skepticism but reverence. Something in him has shifted. The audience picks up on it. The silence now feels like shared weight, not discomfort. Ibrahim, composed, does not gloat. He does not perform. His eyes scan the room slowly, as if memorizing every soul. The narration reflects this, the power of restraint, the dignity of a man who could scream but chooses not to. Traoré had not raised his voice, but he had lifted an entire room, and the impact is undeniable. Behind the cameras, the production crew stands still. A floor manager lowers her headset mic, visibly emotional. A cameraman forgets to adjust his frame, caught in Ibrahim's presence. Steve breaks the silence. You've just reminded me of something I forgot, he says, voice softer now, nearly a whisper. Ibrahim offers no response, only stillness. It's not silence born from superiority, it's patience born from decades of being silenced. The narrator traces Ibrahim's journey briefly, not through biography, but through metaphor, like a river that has carved valleys quietly for centuries. Traoré's calm is the product of depth, not absence. He was never the loudest voice in the room, yet every word he speaks seems etched in granite. Steve shifts slightly in his seat. We've had presidents here, billionaires, celebrities, but no one ever made this studio feel like a courtroom, he admits, half to himself. A few heads in the audience nod slowly. A young black boy in the second row clutches his mother's hand tighter, eyes wide, watching Traoré like he's watching a superhero who doesn't need a cape. And in that moment, something unspoken passes between them, a connection beyond words. Just as Steve readies to move on, Traoré speaks again, unprompted. Justice, he says, drawing in a slow breath, is not a performance. It is remembering the names of those who were buried in silence. The words sting, not as accusation, but as mourning. The narrator brings us closer, into Ibrahim's thoughts. Images flicker briefly, the child version of him at a French-controlled school, a teacher snapping a ruler near his ear for speaking in his native tongue, his mother crying softly after being called a servant by foreign workers who occupied their village, a courtroom in Paris where his voice was dismissed, his country's pain deemed irrelevant. The present moment snaps back. A woman in the audience puts a hand to her mouth, eyes glistening. She doesn't know Ibrahim's full story, but she feels it. Every woman, every man who's ever been told to sit down and be grateful, they hear it too. Steve lets out a shaky breath. His usual jokes nowhere to be found. We're gonna take a break, he says finally, voice raw, eyes not quite meeting the camera, but don't go anywhere, I promise. You want to hear what's next? As the lights dim slightly, and theme music swells, there is no cheering, only reflection. Cut to black, not as an end, but as a breath between storms. The screen returns from black with no fanfare, only the soft hum of studio silence. Steve Harvey hasn't moved. The camera slowly zooms in, capturing the shift not only in his posture but in the atmosphere of the room. Gone is the performative flair of television. What remains is something raw, almost sacred. Ibrahim Traoré sits with the same calm authority, his hands now folded gently in his lap, his gaze lowered not out of submission, but deliberation. The moment holds its breath, and then, through narration, the camera pulls us back not out of the studio, but deeper into the man. A dusty wind sweeps across the savannah of Burkina Faso. A school bell rings, but it is not the sound of welcome. It is a summons. A 10-year-old Ibrahim walks alone toward a faded white building with colonial French plaques still nailed to the doors. His uniform is borrowed, the collar stiff and stained. His shoes are 2 sizes too big, making each step feel heavy. Inside the classroom, a white headmaster slams a ruler across the chalkboard, silencing the murmurs. He writes in French, erasing the local Moor words the students had scribbled in chalk before he arrived. When young Ibrahim opens his mouth to speak, it is his mother's name he mentions, only for the teacher to scoff and mock its pronunciation. You are lucky we educate you, the headmaster says coldly. Without us, you are dust. Years pass. A conference hall in Paris, packed with diplomats and economists. Ibrahim, now in his 20s, stands before a panel, calmly discussing the need for African nations to assert control over their resources. The applause is light. A French delegate leans to a colleague, whispering, "Grateful little soldier." The mic doesn't catch it, but Ibrahim hears. The narration doesn't linger here. It lets the sting of dismissal settle, quiet and corrosive. Then, through a series of quick yet poignant vignettes, the story widens. A teenage protester in Ouagadougou raises his fist in front of a mining compound. French-backed police drag him away. Cut to a widow at the gates of a military base, clutching a crumpled letter from her husband, who vanished during a local raid. No one opens the gate. Her cries go unheard, but the camera stays on her face. Narration describes the way silence becomes a graveyard for the truth. Back in the present, we return to the studio not with a cut, but a slow These memories aren't in the past. They live inside the man still seated across from Steve. The audience is transfixed. A sound technician backstage murmurs, "You can feel it in your bones. Man, like something's breaking." A young intern nudges the producer. "They thought he'd talk policy. He's telling a story we buried." On stage, Ibrahim finally speaks again. His voice is even, but the weight has deepened. "They taught us to see our own soil as dirt, and theirs as gold. They trained our tongues to bite themselves when speaking truth." He glances toward the audience, not confrontational, but as if offering something precious. "But justice," he continues, "is not revenge. It is the dignity of standing on your own land and not needing permission to call it yours." Steve stares. His cue cards limp in his hands now. He doesn't interject. There is no space for it. His role has shifted from host to witness. Ibrahim leans forward, softly but firmly. "You want to know what justice is?" he says, repeating Steve's earlier question with no mockery, only reflection. "It's when a child who was told to kneel learns to build with his hands instead of beg with them." The narration tightens, describing how the audience is no longer here for entertainment. Eyes that once scanned 4 camera angles are now wet, fixed on a man who is undoing generations of distortion with every sentence. A soft sob is heard from a woman in the second row. Her daughter gently wraps an arm around her. Neither speaks. The system is not being exposed by shouting, it is unraveling under the steady light of memory. Truth, told plainly, does not need embellishment. And yet, its weight fills every crevice of the room. In the shadows behind the set, a producer wipes his glasses. "We didn't plan for this," he says. The director responds, "Let it roll." There's a power imbalance in the room, but it's shifting not through volume, through gravity. Through a man who speaks not to perform, but to reclaim. And the audience, once spectators, have become part of that reclamation. No music plays, no transitions, just Ibrahim's final words before the break. "History is not only what they write, it is what we remember, and what we refuse to forget." The silence that follows his last sentence is no longer empty, it pulses with meaning, as if the walls themselves are absorbing his words. The camera lingers on Ibrahim's face, carved in stillness, while narration slips us into a slow, sweeping montage near the United Nations. He stands alone at a podium, papers neatly folded, his voice calm as he rejects IMF restructuring terms. Delegates murmur, whisper, shift in their seats. But Ibrahim doesn't flinch. "We are not your project," he says, voice echoing through chambers long reserved for the powerful. Cut to a dusty village courtyard in Burkina Faso. Children gather under the baobab tree as brick walls rise behind them. A school funded not by charity but reclaimed gold revenues. Ibrahim kneels, speaking to a barefoot girl as she clutches her new textbook. "Your mind," he tells her, in more, "is your homeland." Another image fades in, darker this time. A funeral, a teenage protester's body wrapped in the Burkinabe flag. Ibrahim, sleeves rolled up, helps lower the coffin. No press, no cameras. Just the quiet, solemn dignity of a man who understands that revolution is not a parade. The narration returns us to the studio without warning. The moment before had not ended, it had only deepened. Steve leans forward now, elbows on knees, his voice not rehearsed but cracked at the edges. "Do you ever feel angry?" It's not a provocation. It's a plea, not for drama, but for understanding. Ibrahim doesn't nod, doesn't lean back. He looks at Steve as one might look at a wounded brother, and answers softly, "I feel clarity. Anger is a match. Clarity is firewood." The studio doesn't move. No breath, no shuffle of feet. Even the lights seem dimmed, humbled by the weight of what's being said, and then something breaks through the stillness, not chaos, but emotion. A woman stands in the 4th row. She is middle-aged, dressed in simple fabric, hands visibly shaking. She doesn't ask for the mic. She doesn't need one. Her voice carries, "My father was in the army. He died thinking Africa would never rise without begging." Her voice cracks. "But today, I saw him in you." The room unravels. Not in noise, but in release. Tears fall quietly. People clutch hands. No one looks at their phones. There is nothing to distract from this, because this moment is the reason people came. Ibrahim meets her eyes, and in his expression there is no pride, only sorrow and shared survival. He straightens slightly, and his voice, though gentle, seems to fill the walls. "When you ask what justice feels like," he says, returning to Steve's original question, "it's when the lie they sold you no longer controls your reflection. It's when the boy who was called primitive grows up and teaches the world what civilization forgot." His eyes sweep the room, every face, every tear, every held breath. And then he shifts, not just in topic but in tone, still steady, but deeper, more intimate. "There was a boy once," he begins, whose mother worked in a kitchen. The boy wasn't allowed to sit at the table, so he ate off the floor. Not because he was dirty, but because his skin made him invisible. The words land heavy, not dramatized, but naked. That boy, he continues, learned to walk with his head down. Not out of shame, but because the world taught him humility meant silence. A pause. The silence stretches again, but this time, it doesn't feel hollow. It feels earned. But now, he says, he walks into rooms like this and raises his head, not with pride, but with peace. Steve tries to respond, but his words catch. He pulls a handkerchief from his breast pocket, dabs his eyes. "You've changed something here tonight," he finally says. Voice low, nearly hoarse. Ibrahim doesn't smile. He only tilts his head. "I haven't," he says, and then adds, "Truth did." There's no applause, no studio prompt to cheer, no triumphant score. Just a collective, breathless stillness because everyone in the room knows something unnameable just happened, something more lasting than applause. The camera lingers on the empty stage, a single spotlight still glowing faintly where Ibrahim had once sat. The clapping has faded, the chatter has ceased. Now there's only the hum of the cooling lights and the quiet shuffle of a few crew members packing up. Steve Harvey moves slowly through the hallway, not greeting anyone, not joking. His body holds the weight of something unspoken. In his dressing room, he closes the door behind him gently. The mirror reflects a man visibly changed, not because he heard something new, but because he finally felt something he could never quite name. He lowers himself into the chair, exhales, and stares at the cue card with Ibrahim's name scrawled in thick black ink. Behind him, the muted television plays back the final minutes of the interview. There is no theme music. New scripted outro. Just applause that fades into silence, and Ibrahim's words echoing one more time. On the wall, Steve's eyes find an old black and white photo, him in uniform, saluting alongside his generals, a version of himself frozen in patriotism and pride. He walks toward it slowly, tilts his head. Something in that young man's eyes is unfamiliar now, distant. Then he turns, reaches for his phone, and makes a call. "Hey baby," he says quietly, "I want you to meet someone one day." He doesn't shout, but he makes the world listen. He doesn't explain further. He doesn't need to. The weight in his voice says enough. Outside the studio, the night is thick and still. Viewers stream out quietly. Some hold hands. Others walk alone, but all carry something invisible, something Ibrahim left behind. A woman pauses under the awning, thumbs trembling as she texts a friend. "That man made me cry for a country I've never been to." Down the block, teenager posts a clip from the interview to social media. His caption reads, "This isn't about Africa, it's about us all." The clip spreads like a whispered revolution, shared not with outrage, but reverence. Somewhere in Brussels, a European pundit mocks the interview online, calling it romanticized Pan-Africanism, but his tweet is buried beneath thousands of replies, not angry, but firm. People of all colors and backgrounds quoting Ibrahim's line about reflection and silence. "No hat, just truth," echoed like prayer. In a quiet hotel room, high above the city skyline, Ibrahim sits near the window. The soft glow of the night pulses behind glass. The hum of the city below reaches him like a distant lullaby. A leather-bound notebook rests open on the desk, its pages filled with neat handwriting and more, his mother's language. One line, newly written, sits alone on a page. Justice doesn't arrive with noise. It arrives when silence becomes unbearable. He stares at it for a moment, then sets the pen down. His fingers brush the edge of the paper like one might touch a scar. There is no celebration, no calls from publicists, no entourage waiting in the hallway, just stillness. But the stillness doesn't feel empty, it feels full, charged, changed. The narration eases in again, gentle, reflective. The studio would never be the same, not because a war hero gave a speech, not because a president came to perform, but because a man stepped into a place built for entertainment, and quietly dismantled something sacred without raising his voice. He didn't wave flags, he didn't call for revolt. He simply spoke the truth, and the truth did what truth always does. It disarmed everyone. As the screen darkens, Ibrahim's voice returns, steady and low, like a closing benediction. "I did not come here to win applause," he says. "I came to remind the world silence is not peace." Then everything fades to black.